the conservative aspect of our industry is necessary. We shouldn't fight it. We should embrace it. We work with products that will have a direct impact in lives of people. So there's no way around it. We shouldn't just fight for a less conservative aspect of the discussions. We should leverage, though, new ways of working and new technologies, and maybe the automation and maybe the digitalization with the appropriate checks and balances and following ICH KU guidance, but adapted to the new solution that will solve these new problems.
Have you ever wondered how innovation leaders balance risk-taking with regulatory compliance? Or how to navigate the transition from batch to continuous processing without disrupting your existing operations? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Today, we are diving deep with Irina Ramos, who is a downstream processing powerhouse who has led CMC projects from bench to regulatory filing. And yes, she helped transfer the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine globally. Irina's bringing the unfiltered truth about building innovation culture in conservative environments. So grab your coffee. This episode is packed with plenty of insights. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Irina. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. Irina, share something that you believe about bioprocess development that most people disagree with.
I think it's the vision for the future. Some of us might disagree when we'll be ready to accomplish that vision. Some people might disagree that in the next 10 to 20 years, we will have the lights out manufacturing, which is the same as saying we don't really need people to walk in and gown up and perform the tasks that today we have to perform. I do believe we can do that. I think we can envision a manufacturing facility that is smaller, that doesn't need all the people in there except to solve problems. And if everything goes steady state, we don't need the lights on.
I love this vision. It's a great vision. I like that. Before we dive a bit further into today's topic, we're going to cover continuous processing, obviously, and a lot more things. I would love to go into your story. Can you please draw us into your story and share what got you started in biotech? What were some interesting pit stops along the way and what you're doing today?
It's a series of happy accidents, and I hope students and junior scientists are listening to that, because sometimes when they happen, we wonder if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's the way we embrace them. My background is chemical engineering. I'm originally from Portugal, and biotech industry at the time was not big there. There was no focus at the university to take us to that industry. So the happy accident was an exchange student program that was opened to the United States and opened up opportunities to look at small things. So now I can look at cells and I can look at proteins and interaction through a microscope. And I learn, I can apply chemical engineering principles to very small microscopic things. And the interesting series of events is when we are very happy to work with the people that we encounter in life. And that has been the driver for my options, for my choices. It's really about the people. So I absolutely love to work with the professor that I met here in the United States. And Dr. Teresa Good invited me to come and apply for the PhD program. And 22 years later, I'm still here. After the program, I was able to get a job in the industry at AstraZeneca. At the time was MedImmune. And we learned to work in this small company environment mentality with resources at the time from the large company. So for over a decade, we were growing with the AstraZeneca portfolio. And I learned what a chemical engineer could do from a bench scale all the way to a large scale. So that was a good flow of how we can apply our background in the industry.
Yeah, that's great. I love the way you see it, and it's about people. And I totally see that. Obviously, we're passionate about science, but finally we work with people. And that's also part of my story. I love working with different people and very interesting people in the positive sense and learning from a lot of exciting people. So, Irina, you have obviously seen a lot of different companies, different settings. You have led teams in early stage development all the way to regulatory filings. I would first like to look at this part of your work and look a bit at what are the biggest mindset shifts you have seen successful CMC leaders make when they transition from a scientist to an innovation leader.
You are working with individuals that come from very different functions. Each function has its own role, responsibility, and of course, accountability. So in order to bring them all together, we need to be all aware what are the goals for that project, for that program, and for the team. So there are two things. First is the goal setting has to be very clear. We all need to agree on the timeline. We all need to understand where the resources come from. And we need to give and take. The second one is the risks. From the unknowns to the absolutely knowns and high risk, how do we all embrace the same risks? Traditionally, we call it risk register. A risk register is not to be divided in slices per function. It's really to compile the risks so the team understands we all embrace the same risks. So in many ways, that's the secret that is not so secret anymore, is how do we build a team where we all understand through good communication tools what will take us to get to meet that timeline. So often you find the stronger teams are the ones that we share those resources. That goes through knowledge, from leadership approval at the functional level to the overarching government of the portfolio. So I think that how do you then build that trust that we are all together for the same purpose?
We work in a conservative industry. Obviously, there is a lot of innovation going on, but still biotech is quite conservative. So how do you build an innovation culture despite these constraints we have in our industry? Before we continue, biotech founders, I want to talk directly to you. Do you know that feeling when an investor asks about your manufacturing strategy and you freeze? One wrong CMC decision can cost you $2 million and 18 plus months of delays. Yet many CEOs are flying blind on these critical decisions. That's why I created the 1-week CMC strategy assessment. In 1 week, you get a personalized assessment of your molecule and development stage. We identify critical gaps before they become million-dollar mistakes, plus a strategic roadmap for high-stakes investor meetings. One CEO told me, David took me from feeling powerless about our CMC roadmap to confidently pitching investors. An absolute game changer for time-pressed CEOs. Whether you are preparing for Series A, approaching IND filing, or facing scale-up challenges, this gives you confidence to ace investor and board conversations instead of surviving them. Ready to stop second-guessing your CMC strategy? Check the link in the show notes and secure your spot. Because Your breakthrough therapy deserves a solid CMC strategy. Now, let's get back to our episode.
Everything starts with a problem, with a need. If the problem and that need is a common denominator, then it's much easier to convince you need a solution, that you need to change. You need to seek for that solution. Often you need to collaborate with vendors or other partners. If you don't have that common understanding that the problem is real and it's no longer just a functional interest to improve, it's harder to convince the other stakeholders because they don't want to change. Things are working, why would we change? So it's easier to innovate when you're looking at novel modalities because the current platform doesn't fit anymore. It's also easier to innovate when you mention to leadership that you need to invest, and that brings the resources, could be, of course, the budget, could be the people, could be the space. Maybe you need a different facility in order to get that product out the door. Because let's be honest, in our industry, is the product and the discovery of that product that drives everything else. Manufacturing comes as a very important piece of the puzzle, but we need to make it work for that product to help the patients. So new modalities, new constructs, I like to call them these Frankenstein mAbs, right? We no longer have the simple mAbs. The traditional 20-year-old platform doesn't work all the time. So now how do you translate that to innovation? And innovation comes in different shapes and forms. Often people like to think it's an equipment, it's a shiny piece of equipment that makes it work. Sometimes innovation is the way we work. We might need to change things to make things accelerated. We might need to automate through documentation and template writing. We might need to innovate the way we interact with the regulatory agencies. So the vision has to be, what is the next platform? What does that look like? And does that apply across the portfolio? Or you have a dedicated platform per modality. So now that you have people on board with your problem, you can bring those stakeholders to discuss a technology roadmap. And how does that play a role for your product launch? So it's no longer just the early stage that matter. You have to think about all the way to the filing for a BLA, for instance. It doesn't mean you have to have all the answers at the beginning, though, right? People are very skeptical about what that strategy looks like. There's so much we don't know. It's okay. What is not okay is that we don't think and address also what we don't know. So we need to build that technology roadmap, identifying the milestones when I absolutely need to know the answer and what are the functions that need to be involved by that time. And at the end of the day, it's really human psychology. We want to be heard. We want our function to be represented when it's supposed to be. And how do we bring that report across those milestones for those functions?
You're making an important point. It's one of the things, the way we think. And so this leads me to the next question. What mindsets would you suggest to the scientists listening should they adopt to thrive in this environment and also to drive innovation?
We always want to work with competent people. We want to trust them because we believe that they know what they're talking about from their special function or area. We also want to work with positive people, but they live in reality. So you see, I'm talking about you have to be good at what you do. And in order to get that, it's not only through school. You have to be smart the way you interact with people, the way you listen to them, and really with the intention for the common good. Not a personal, individual, just agenda, because I saw or heard in a conference or I read a really nice paper. How do you translate that idea into the problem that your organization needs to be solved? Because if they don't see that need, they will not support you. So we need that competent person. You build that trust, and then you have a conversation that builds that strategy. The conservative aspect of our industry is necessary. We shouldn't fight it. We should embrace it. We work with products that will have a direct impact in lives of people. So there's no way around it. We shouldn't just fight for a less conservative aspect of the discussions. We should leverage, though, new ways of working and new technologies and maybe the automation and maybe the digitalization with the appropriate checks and balances and follow ICH-KU guidance, but adapted to the new solution that will solve these new problems. So I want to emphasize that, and we'll talk more about AI, I'm sure. We don't have computers to replace us. We still need competent, valuable scientists and engineers to contextualize how we're going to apply those solutions.
Whether you're leading innovation projects or you are in CMC development or preparing an IND filing or BLA, you have to interact with all kinds of different stakeholders, especially in bigger companies. And one of our listeners mentioned that coordinating between various stakeholders across different departments, for instance, in big companies and locations, is their biggest challenge when implementing innovative solutions. But I think it's also valid if in other kinds of settings. I would love to get your perspective, Irina, on that. From your experience, what strategies have you found most effective for communication, the collaboration, and also finally get the achievements or the result you were trying to achieve?
I had experiences like that too. Absolutely. From time zones to geography to culture. The way you even methodical think about something. How do you go about explaining, giving your update and explaining what you're doing? So I found a little different ways depending on my colleagues. Sometimes you might want to leverage a one-on-one. Maybe you have a one-on-one every other week with someone that has maybe very poor English. Think about that. And now that you understand in that more focused environment, you are backing that colleague. And if you're leading a team, you're not alone anymore. That colleague is not alone anymore. And you're representing and filling the gaps as the colleague is communicating to the rest of the team if necessary. You need a good project management skill set in a team. And that means when you present an agenda, sometimes it's not enough for these very different cultures of operating to have a bullet list of what we're going to discuss. Maybe you need to be clear about the expectations when we discuss those topics. So I actually did that. I wrote not only we need updates from these functions, but the expectation is not only the time, but understand the linkage of that particular topic with other functions. So now they should go more prepared. The action items, very clear, and also the timeline. So clear expectations, organized agendas, and then minutes that really reflect the conversation that happened. But we need to be prepared to have ad hoc discussions. And in a recent example, I also find if we are a little bit more senior in our organization and we've seen good ways of doing things, we are responsible from coaching. So have you thought about, and you need to build that trust in order, your ideas to be accepted. Maybe you just ask them to trust you. Let's try it this way. Let's see if it works. But it's complex and it applies to project teams. It applies to innovation. Sometimes innovation brings us an extra layer of complexity, which is, do they have the capability on that site? Do they have what it takes from space to bandwidth, people, the know-how? And I shouldn't assume. So don't assume anything. You should ask, be curious about what those individuals, those other teams do on a business as usual environment. So when you need to press them, to accelerate them, to think outside the box, you already understand what kind of tools you need to use to stretch a little bit more.
What I'm hearing comes down to clear communication. Number two, trying to understand what their needs are or who they are, and then also having clear expectations and then make sure that this happens according to the agreed timeline. Now, let's shift our conversation to a topic that's dear to your heart. Let's talk about continuous manufacturing. For those who are still in the fed batch world, let's start out in a controversial way. What is one misconception about continuous manufacturing that you hear most often, and how do you address it?
Too complex, too expensive to implement. It's going to take longer timelines to develop the continuous process, even before you scale it up. A lot of uncertainty, right? A lot of ambiguity. It's all valid. All of these concerns are valid, and they actually matter. And why do I call them misconceptions at times? It's really company by company, facility by facility, or situation by situation. So continuous manufacturing is not the solution for all the products. Neither there is one solution fitting all for continuous. So that's why the community is growing. The vendors are providing different solutions, and we don't call continuous all the time. We call it intensified. You can even call it automated. So how do we make sure that for our portfolio, for the existing facilities, both internal and external, right? Because if you have to work with CMOs, you need to understand their ability to adapt to your products. And you need to make a decision. Is it worth it? Can we have a forecast that we can actually trust? Often these forecasts for blockbusters versus are not really met. Just give us an indication. And can we expand it and apply it to the capacity we will need for that product? So it goes down to productivity. For us in the bioprocess world, and my background was downstream, if my upstream colleagues don't develop a highly productive upstream process in the bioreactor, you can think about traditional perfusion, steady state. You can think about dynamic perfusion. You can think about a couple of weeks durations to a month duration. Does not really matter. The productivity is the measure. How much mass per unit of time, per unit of volume you're able to produce. How much do you actually need? Only after that downstream makes sense to intensify it, to make it continuous. Even though some intensification tools in downstream could be applied to fed batch. So if we find a way that we have a flexible facility that is more like pieces of puzzle, that you identify a stage-wise approach to implement it because it makes sense for your product, because you were able to get a cell line or an upstream feeding strategy that took you to that really good productivity, 10x productivity, 5x productivity, then it makes sense to start thinking about the downstream integration. What I will highlight is the PAT part, all the analytical and the sensors and the real-time or near real-time tools. If they're being developed to facilitate or even enable continuous processing, why wouldn't we use it in a fed batch? So I actually think from an analytical perspective, you might have a much stronger push from our customers to get a technology out the door. And I know the regulators want that because at the end of the day, they want us to control our processes better. So how can we entertain this vision of what is out there and then make our own internal strategy because it fits our portfolio needs for the next 5 to 10 years? The worst thing that can happen is if we're distracted and keep it steady state, this works for now, and no one is really thinking about the next 3, 5, 10 years in terms of portfolio evolution. And then leadership comes with these very intriguing molecules that are not very productive in a certain way, or they are very liable. They degrade very fast. And that's where you see continuous can actually be your solution. So I talked about productivity and now I'm talking about product quality. Maybe product quality could be another driver to implement continuous manufacturing because then your intermediate, it's not an intermediate for too long.
You've just come back from the integrated continuous biomanufacturing Dubrovnik. I saw it on LinkedIn. What is the state of continuous manufacturing today? Like, what is hot in this area?
The most interesting thing about the conference is that we will focus to have more continents represented and leveraging the location in Europe. And we did that. We also wanted to bring new people and institutions on board. So we offer a pre-conference tutorials with 3 big names of this field that decide to not retire. And we're very thankful for that. They're still around and they still are super valuable to provide us context. So now, David, you can imagine you have this body of new people coming, interested and curious. You have more organizations represented, presenting posters and oral talks. And at the end of the day, what you have more and diverse solutions to intensify it and make the bioprocess continuous. And then you enable a lot of more conversations of what if scenarios. So what is the hot? The hot is that we're getting bombarded in a positive way with new modalities and new constructs that no longer fit the previous platform. And you need to find automated and smart ways to move the needle, to get closer to utilizing models that are predictive to what's happening in our process. They are predictive not only the real-time activities, but also the scalability. And there's a lot of things that are used in other industries that vendors are applying across. So they're bringing to our industry that is late in the game in many ways, but also brings the complexity of closed systems, single-use components that need to last. I think very, very important is how do we leverage the expectations from documentation, data gathering, and monitoring, and do more real or near real time to feed what some people are skeptical, others are encouraged, the real-time release. So how do we feed all of these ideas come together eventually? They converge into processing it faster, highly productivity, smaller facilities, single use, maybe a hybrid of stainless steel with single use, but then eventually your PAT supports better process control, more digitalization.
How do you decide whether you're going to go for a hybrid approach or fully end-to-end? Because as you said, you have a lot more to choose from and it can be quite overwhelming. Are there some easy guiding principles to help scientists choose which approach is the best for them?
I think there is. Stage-wise is always better, even if your final goal is end-to-end continuous. So a stage-wise, unless you are building from scratch, right? And you have this greenfield or even a brownfield sort of facility design, and then you can leverage that space and but you need to have a portfolio that will feed into that. Even the scalability, how do you go? And maybe you start with clinical manufacturing and then eventually you have those products, if they are successful, are the ones that will feed into your commercial facility. So you need that vision, you need that roadmap. But an hybrid approach, in particular when vendors are still maturing with their solutions to this field, is super important. And maybe we should press on the big company vendors, but I think we should also entertain the smaller ones that bring solutions and they're not monopolizing the industry as much. Competition is very healthy in these fields as well. It's really what fits to your organization if you have a vision of what kind of portfolio you're going to be focusing on.
And to what extent do they need to focus on the controlled strategy or like real-time monitoring, which is, I think, quite important in continuous manufacturing? Are there some easy solutions, for instance, to start?
So think about what you do already in fed batch. How do you control the process? What are the parallelisms? Maybe you don't need everything under the sun. And that's what demystifies the complexity of this implementation. Only because it would be nice to have, it doesn't mean it's a must-have to control it today. So leave the nice-to-haves to the end. Now focus on the must-have, which is really linked with the regulatory expectation. So look at what you do with fed batch, what you absolutely need to continue doing for continuous, and then maybe add sensors that might give you feedback loop control, right? Concentrations. Maybe a pH. If you're titrating in line, you might want to have that sensor connected to a not so sophisticated feedback loop control. In fed batch, you don't need that as much. So there are certain things, but you're not inventing the wheel. Those things already exist. You're just transferring this knowledge for an equipment that now is closed to enable a closed system operation. So there's a lot of examples like that where you can leverage existing sensors to give you those answers.
That's it for part 1. We have explored the leadership mindset shifts, innovation culture building, and the advantages of continuous manufacturing. If these insights sparked something for you, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform. It helps scientists like you discover these conversations. Stay tuned for part 2, where Irina reveals what the COVID vaccine taught us about what's truly essential in process development, plus her take on AI in biomanufacturing. See you next time. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.